Welcome to another episode of Blood and Bones. It's your host, Mandy Tang. The topic of this episode is you can write a book. You really can. I am not a classically trained writer. I am not someone who the writing comes easy. I have not gone to Iowa writing workshop, like none of that. Okay, I'm just a regular person who decided once and for all in my early 40s that this is finally something that I want to pursue. And so I have been bumbling along. I have been struggling to figure out how in the world I'm going to write this 60,000 word manuscript, which it is self-help. It's shorter than if you were to do fiction or fantasy or romance, any of the genres. This is probably the most straightforward thing to do, which is to write a self-help book. But I'm just going to get into it. I'm going to share with you guys what it's been like, my wins, my failures, everything in between. Let's start at the very beginning, which is the blank page. In the self-help book proposal, it's written on spec, meaning you're not submitting the full manuscript. You're just saying it's basically a business plan for your book. And you're saying, here's what I think it will be. Here's the table of contents. Here are some sample chapters. But you haven't actually written the thing. In some ways, this is so beautiful because it allows there to be this grand unfolding. And in other ways, it's terrifying and infuriating because you're like, why? Why did I pitch it like this? This makes no sense. When I say blank page, like, yes, you have a table of contents and yes, you have some sample chapters, but you don't actually have anything other than some very, very tightly well-written sample chapters, but which are incredibly disjointed because they're sample chapters. And so where do you begin? Julia Cameron talks about how you just have to lay the track every day. She says, okay, as a writer, you're just laying the track like as if you are on a train going from New York to San Francisco. And every day you just lay more track so that the train can ride on the track. I loved this visual. I imagined myself just laying the track, but I also was really confused because where the hell am I laying? Like, am I starting from chapter 1? I mean, of course I am, but also what? So I did a very messy first draft, which probably... Okay, the entire manuscript has to be 60,000 words. All right, that's about 120 pages single-spaced. If you think about you're doing it in Microsoft Word or Google Doc. I'm out here thinking, okay, let's just write let's just start writing. Let's just start laying the track. I don't really have a plan. I'm just going for it. So I get a kind of very messy first draft done. And it's probably only 20 pages. I read it back to myself and I realize this is not good. It's just not good. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's not going, there's no unifying theme. I think this is something that I really struggled with, is that because it's self-help, I felt this pressure to have an answer. I felt this pressure to, okay, the topic of my book is about career wounds, and it's basically like all this shit happens to you at work. We never process it and we never decompress, so we just like bring baggage with us from job to job, and then eventually it eats us alive. Okay. I'm very good at describing that interaction. I'm very good at describing that sociological chain of events. Then I felt this pressure to have an answer. Okay. One of my favorite books that I ever read is this book called Adult Children of Emotionally Unavailable Parents. And I loved that book because A, I read it and was like, oh no, this is me, right? This is both my parents and maybe I am also an emotionally unavailable, like it just the whole generational, generation upon generation. I saw all the patterns, I saw all the things. My friend Hannah recommended that I read it and it changed my life. Okay. I loved that book because it basically had two parts. The first part was identifying all of the symptoms and giving name to all of the shit that we carry, right? It was like, here are some signs of if you have a narcissistic parent, or like some common examples would be this, that, and the other. And the whole time I'm reading this book in bed, I'm turning to my husband. I'm like, oh no. And I'll like read aloud something to him. He'll like process it and be like, oh no. Like it, the whole thing. Okay. The whole time, all of us, the whole house, we're like, oh no. Second part of it though, incredibly instructional, incredibly uplifting, sharing tactical, practical advice on, okay, so here are some mindset shifts. Here are some ways that you can manage situations in real time. And I loved that. I loved that it was made you feel so seen, but then it didn't just leave you stranded. It actually gave you some tools to be like, all right, girl, we know this is going to happen in your life. And here we go. Here's what you do. Right? I loved that. So I wanted to emulate. I felt a pressure to emulate that. But I could not, for the life of me, figure out how to heal a career wound. Of course, there's the regular things. Mindfulness, being grounded, reminding yourself of your values. But I didn't know, like I just kind of stared off in space for a long time, asking myself, well, how the hell do you heal a career wound? And then feeling this incredible pressure to answer the question. And I talked to people, I asked for advice, I read a bunch of other books, I reread my book. I did the best I could in terms of coming up with that answer, but truth be told, it was very difficult because my general thesis is that a career wound is it's a constellation. It's a series of patterns that have been repeated from your childhood or your teenagehood or your early career. And so the purpose is not so much to heal it in the sense that, oh, you're great and this never happened to you, but more so it's the sense that it's there, the pain is there to help you remember. And I'll tell you what happened, honestly, for me to realize this. So I'm in the shower where I do a lot of like my best thinking. I'm a Pisces. The water helps like stimulate my creative brain. I'm in the shower and I'm standing there and I'm thinking back to my worst career injuries. Okay, for lack of a better word. Times where I had breakups with other founders, where I left jobs, where I experienced abuse in the workplace, like all of it. And I'm thinking, I don't know that I can ever heal from that in the sense that I'm this like new shiny person. I can grow from it. I can learn from it. I can accept my own limitations. I can know that I did my best, but I also probably fucked some stuff up, and that I'm embarrassed about what happened. I'm ashamed about what happened. I can feel all the feelings. And I realized that I don't think most people want just a clean healing. Like, oh, the bone is set, it's regrown perfectly, you're good to go. It's more that you're just staring into the void at your own humanity and your own poor decisions. And it's a way to, I don't want to say grow because that sounds silly, but it's a way to be humbled. And I don't think we're meant to heal. I think we're meant to remember. And from that remembering, we can then make better decisions that allow us to take care of ourselves and allow us to really sit in the wisdom that we have well earned and deserved. Okay? So these thoughts will come to you as you're writing. And then you're like, oh, well, okay, but that's not really the book I sold. That's not really what I pitched. And is that a little bit too nuanced? And maybe I just haven't dug far enough, and maybe there is an answer and I just don't know it. And so you get into it with yourself. All the while, okay, so what I'm describing is this act of the creative reveal, which is that the thing that you start with is not where you end. And the assumptions that you made in the early stages of your book proposal may or may not hold true in the end. And so you're doing all of this emotional excavation. You're doing all of this realization about your message. And this is really your relationship with your art. Okay? It's a slippery thing. It doesn't show up the way you think it's going to show up. You're doing this deep work, and at the same time, your analytical, critical brain is telling you, hurry up. Time is a ticking. Okay, that's all great, but you need to get words on the page, because there is this healthy but also crippling fear that I don't know if I can do it. I don't know about you. I'm a first-time writer. I've never written 60,000 words before. I did NaNoWriMo. Okay, it's that writing challenge. I did that. It was the worst. I mean, at the end, it was just stream of consciousness. I mean, I did it, but it's not real. Okay. So I've never created a body of work at that length, at that scale. There is a big, for me, that was very motivating because it was a big fear. What if I cannot do this? Or what if I bit off more than I can chew? Or like I can do it, but what if it's not good? Okay, so we're going to get to that. So tactically speaking, what I start to do is I'm also having to trick myself into getting my ass in the chair and doing the writing. Because even though, and this is the crazy part, even though this has been my life's dream, is to get a book deal and actually have a deadline and have, something to work towards. This has been my dream since I was 12 years old. When it comes to me sitting in the chair and doing it, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. It's hard. It's hard. I have to get my thoughts on the page. I have to write. I have to have a schedule. The whole thing is overwhelming. But you remind yourself, hey bitch, this was your dream. Can you no. So you're fighting with yourself too about the dream versus the reality. And the reality is you just sit in front of your computer with a Taylor Swift playlist and you just force yourself to write during the summer when everyone else is on vacation and playing and spending money. No, you're just, it's like cup after cup of Earl Grey tea, you in front of the computer, you handwriting this stuff, doing whatever it takes. So I'm going to share some of the things that I used to trick myself to do this. Literally what I had to do. I am not even going to pretend like I'm some amazing person. No, I just had to trick myself. All right. The first thing that I tried was I tried to do based on page count. Okay. I was like, well, I just have to get a certain number of pages a day. And I had read Stephen King's On Writing. And you do this. You Google, what do other artists do? What do other writers do to create these systems and processes? Because maybe if I can borrow those systems, then I too can be successful. I had read that Stephen King does 3 pages a day, although he's highly prolific. And so I said, okay, let's try 2 pages a day. Let's do 2 pages a day. And that started to work, except the problem is I got the pages in, but then I was so focused on just hitting the page mark that the quality was not there. And by quality, I mean, it depends what kind of writer you are, but I'm the kind of writer where I get more of like an emotional feeling of what I'm trying to say, and I can capture that feeling. I can capture the essence of that thought. But then, of course, you need to construct it. There needs to be scaffolding. There needs to be foundation laid. There needs to be good, well-structured sentences with equal parts good flow and ease, and also some emotional joy in these sentences. It's a lot of work to get to that point. And my initial instinct was, okay, let me just get the emotion on the page. I can clean up the words later. So, because there's your writing brain and then there's your editing brain. And I was just relying so heavily on my editing brain because I was, again, terrified that I wasn't going to be able to make the word count. Okay. So I started doing the pages. I probably got to 40 pages and then stopped and read it back and realized emotionally this is hitting, but structurally it is messy and disjointed. And I think this strategy, like if I'm going to push through and use this strategy the whole way, like the editing process is going to be such a nightmare. Perhaps I can skew a little bit more towards a structure versus just like vomiting things on the page. Okay. Then so that got me to 40 pages. Not great pages, but 40 nonetheless. I'll take them. Okay. Then I switched a tactic again because the whole time I'm sitting there Googling. I'm Googling how to be a writer. I don't know. I'm Googling how to do this. And of course, I worked at startups. I worked in tech companies. And so I'm very familiar with this idea of sprints. I understand about the Pomodoro method. So I'm like, okay, let me do timed sprints. Because there was also this phenomenon that was happening where I would always feel like I had to be writing. Like if I was doing the laundry, I would say, you could be writing right now. If I had to go run an errand, if I had to go to Walmart and pick up some groceries, you really should be writing. Yoga class, it just never left me. I needed to figure out a way where I could have a relationship with the writing where I could be done. Like there could be a thing where I could say to myself, well, you did this today. And so therefore, good job, gold star, you're done. You can feel less guilt. Like stop having this guilt eat you and follow you around. There's no reason for this. And also I kind of knew that I needed to make the process pleasurable for me. I needed to make it not so oppressive because otherwise I would never want to do it again. And so I had to build in some of these ways to play with it and make it fun and make it enjoyable and also make it so that when I wasn't doing it, I did not have this incredible weight on my shoulders and guilt that I wasn't doing it. Okay. So I started doing these timed sprints where I would say, okay, the goal is to do some weeks it would be 5 sprints a day. Some weeks it would be, it would also depend on how I was feeling and where I was in my cycle and all of that. But let's say on average, I wanted to get 6 sprints a day of 20 minutes each. That's essentially 2 hours a day of sitting down and writing. I also built in breaks for myself where it would say, okay, you're going to do this for 4 weeks and then you're going to take a 2-week break. And on that 2-week break, like you're really going to take a break. You're not going to look at it. Okay. That got me, I'd say 90% there. 90% there. And by the way, the part of you that wants things to be clean, the part of you that wants things to be organized, you just have to put it away for a minute because it doesn't, like, I knew that what I was writing didn't make any sense sometimes, and you just have to be like, okay, but that's fine. There's a thought here that wants to come out. Let me just let it live on the page. We will let it rest on the page, and then we'll come back to it later, is what I would tell myself. It was around this point too, I want to mention, that I made the switch because everything was at that point in a Google Doc. My thought for that was, I'm just out and about. I'm at my daughter's gymnastics and she does gymnastics for 2-3 hours at a time. So I want to be able to just access my writing from anywhere. I want to be able to do it on my laptop. I want to be able to, wherever. I have 2 computers at home. Like, okay. And so everything had been in a Google Doc. But the problem is that I had a hard time zooming out and seeing how all of the pieces were connected. I had a really hard time because I would just be scrolling for ages. I mean, even to close the document and open the document again, you're just like sitting there and you're scrolling. You're like, oh, like, let me just get to page 45 already. Jeez, And I had a copy of Scrivener. It's one of these softwares. It's a writing software, and I'd had a copy. And the thing about that is, you buy it once, you have it forever. It's none of this like subscription crap. It just literally was. I think I paid $50 or $60 one time, have it forever. But I didn't want to use it because it doesn't sync in the same way as a Google Doc. You can sync it to the cloud, so you can have a folder, but then it's not as seamless as a Google Doc. But finally, when I was probably at about 40,000 out of 60,000 words, I was like, this thing is just too much of a hot mess. I cannot look at it anymore. Like, I cannot scroll. What am I supposed to add tags and anchors and comment? Like, forget it. I spent a weekend essentially moving everything over from the Google Doc into the Scrivener. And that in itself was a joy. And that in itself was so scratching the perfect itch in my brain, because I got to take all of my shitty, disjointed thoughts and put things into an order that I could visually see. And I loved it. You have to build these things in for yourself. You have to find joy wherever you can find it. Okay? And as I was writing, I just want to share also one thing that did happen that made me feel really, really good and really powerful. Was there are these small moments in writing and with any art that you create where it almost it feels like you're so connected to what you're doing that it is that flow that comes out of you. And the flow is when your mind and your body and whatever creative God is out there channeling the information to you through your own experience, but it's like, it feels like a download, okay? Whatever God is up there, like, everybody's aligned and everybody's happy. And I just want to be realistic with you guys. Let's say I had the full day where I'm doing other things. I'm feeding children. I'm my children, not just random children. But I'm out, I'm out and about. But I also have maybe 2 hours earmarked for writing. And I like to get my writing done in the morning because that's when my brain is the freshest, even though, again, that's a struggle. Because I don't want to I want to be like, oh, let me check out my TikToks and let me see who commented on this, or let me check my bank account. Like, I love to just putter around in the morning and do administrative stuff, but it's I have to force myself to do it. Okay, so when of that 2 hour period where you're literally like, okay, I'm writing now, and you do 20-minute sprint, you take a 5-minute pause, 20-minute sprint, 5-minute pause. In that entire 2 hour period, you might have 7 minutes of a joyful feeling. I just want to be very clear about that. when you engage with your art, it's probably 85% just hard work, just getting yourself into the seat, getting the structure, getting the right lighting, getting the right music, just settling your ass down. And somewhere in that mush, somewhere in that pile of confusion is 5 to 7 minutes of greatness. And I'm talking even as you're writing. Let's say you're writing 3 paragraphs, okay? Paragraph 1, it's a slog. Paragraph 2, it's a slog. Paragraph 3, it's a slog. But the last 2 sentences are magic. That's what I'm talking about. I want us to start realizing that the ratio of juicy amazingness to mushy badness is like 10 to 1 mushy badness, okay? And even if the writing is on paper a-okay and someone else would read it and feel something and it could communicate what you're trying to say, you just feel like a snail slithering about as you're writing it. It's just sometimes that magic hits you and you feel so at ease and so happy, and just, it's like a pocket, a small tiny pocket of deliciousness. And for me, that's what kept me going, was I don't know where else to get that feeling. I really don't. I mean, maybe it's like when I have a really intense workout and then at the end of the workout, you get that rush of emotion. Maybe that comes close. Or if you're driving with your partner and your kids are in the back and they say something really smart and you can look at your partner and be like, we did that. Like maybe those moments come close. Okay. But when it comes to your relationship with your creativity, it's so awesome. Like there's nothing else like that. And so it makes it, to me, it makes it worth it. And I also just want to be very real about that most of the time it's just a slog. And once in a while you get zapped by lightning. To me, that's how it feels. Okay. The last thing that I want to share in this whole writing process bonanza is that my goal was to get to 60,000 words. Okay. I met that goal about a week and a half ago. Even to get to that goal, I was at 59,000 words. And you'd think, oh, it'll just be this great final push, like at the end of a marathon where you're pushed over the finish line. Nope. 59,000 words. And I'm still just like, what the fuck do I say here now? Like, I just was still. Maybe 5 novels in, this will be a much easier process and I can watch this video back or listen to this podcast back and just laugh. But for now, your girl is still struggling. Okay. The final mile, like the final, not even mile, the final quarter mile, like the run through Central Park at the end, okay, of the marathon, I couldn't even do it. What I had to resort to is I had to take my phone, I had to turn on the recording app, and I had to talk into it. And I had to just have the words come out of my mouth. There was like a specific topic, and I was like, okay, just think about this topic, think about some keywords, talk it out. Pretend you're leaving your friend a voice note. Okay, just talk it out. And then I transcribe, you know how in the recording app, it'll transcribe it for you? This is what, I mean, I like scraped by the last, like through my fingernails. I was just exhausted. I was so tired. Please don't judge me, or you can, but just know, like, I am the equivalent of a first-time marathoner who just really, really, really wants to run, but probably isn't that naturally gifted at running, and so am just struggling my way through. For those of you who are like natural writers, incredibly gifted, like, please just skip this video or skip this, just stop listening, because that I'm just different. This is not easy for me. Okay, so once I got it to 60,000 words, then remember, it's still a highly volatile substance, because I know in there are pockets of genius, and I know in there are also huge swaths of simple drivel that are poorly written and poorly constructed. Again, you have to let it rest. You have to build in these times of rest for yourself. I let the thing sit, and then I'm like, now what? Now I have to edit the thing, but I don't want to edit. I don't want to look at the thing. I don't want to look at it. I don't even want to look at it. Don't look at me. I can't. I just can't do it. Again, you have to trick yourself. Okay, so how did I trick myself this time? I printed it out. Even as I'm printing it out, I'm like, oh, you're going to waste paper. You're wasting paper. Maybe you should do it like small font or double-sided. No, I printed, and I said, no, you print it out, Mandy. It's okay. You can afford the paper. It's okay. You can print it out. Printed it out. Okay. So the current method that I'm on is I printed out the entire stack of let's call it 120 pages. All right. I literally didn't know where to start. I said, what am I editing for? Am I editing for emotion? Am I editing for grammar, spelling, structure, prose? Like, what am I editing for? And so I decided that this is the visual I have in my mind. I have a tub of murky water filled with like old apples and like bits of food. And my goal is to clean the water. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is you have to stick your hands in and pull out all the gunk. Okay? And then just set it aside so it doesn't clog up your drain. That's all you have to do, is just pull out the gunk. So that was my first pass, is we're just trying to pull out the gunk. Anything where it's obviously structurally not working, where it's obviously a big turd, like, we can move that aside. So I have a section in my scrivener now called Save for Later ? It's just crap. It's like anything where I'm just like, this makes no sense. Or if it's an emotionally displaced item, where let's say I'm using an example that I think either isn't going to resonate, or more often than not, it was an example that was too personal, and I don't know that there's such a thing as too personal, but where you're turning the table, right? You're saying, okay, this was for me to get out, to be able to like connect with the message, but for the reader, is this the best way to communicate that story? Is there another story I could use that perhaps is not so personal or so triggering or so fill in the blank? Okay. But what I'm doing this first pass is I'm literally just pulling out the rotten apples and the big hunks of junky chunks. Okay. That's all I'm doing. And then the next pass, there's just going to be less chunks. And then I'll maybe sift through it a little finer. And we're just going to get into finer and finer and finer detail until at the very end, it will literally be, okay, let's make sure punctuation, sentences, structure, tabs, visual, like just cleaning it up. But basically, in my mind, it's a series of sieves. Is that what it is? It's where you strain something. It's a series of strainers. And this big one is I'm just sticking my arms in, I'm getting the junk out. Okay. How am I doing that? I have the big stack of 120 pages. I've split that stack into 3 sections. I'm taking one section at a time. I am marking it up with a pen. I'll do 4 or 5 pages at a time. Mark up. Then I get to my computer. I make the edits. When those edits are done, I take those pages, I turn that shit over, and it sits in a different pile. Because I think at this point in the process, I need to do this visually. I need the tiny dopamine hit that comes from seeing one pile get smaller and one pile get bigger. It's just a trick. I know that I need to tether myself this way. And the reason that I am so faithful to the act of continuing to trick myself, to continuing to bind myself to this work, is because I believe in it. But I also know myself. And I know I'm a sneaky little person. And I know that if I could just eat some pretzels dipped with pub cheese and not write the book, that like I would, right? But I made a promise to myself that I'm going to finish this thing to the best of my ability, knowing also that it's not going to be the perfect book. Like there will always be something that I'm like, oh, that was annoying the way I wrote that, or I don't love that. But also knowing, okay, this is book 1, right? Book 2, I probably can skip all of these steps. I probably don't have to trick myself in this. I probably won't even think about it as a trick. I probably will just be like, oh, here are some strategies. I already know the shortcuts. Like, I already know what works for me. Okay? But that is the process of, in my opinion, being in relationship with your art, is also learning all of your dark parts and learning all of the ways that you struggle with it, and then committing to using your light parts and your higher self in connection with your shadow, right? To be like, here are all the ways that I'm actually going to construct a system that lets me complete a goal that everyday me doesn't really want to do. I love it. I hope this was helpful. I hope you get something out of it. I hope that you engage with your own art. I hope that you create your own systems to trick yourself into doing it, because like I said, that 7 minutes out of the 2 hours where you actually feel like you're flying and you feel like, oh, this is good and I love it, and that sentence was great, that's what we do it for. Love the process, not the outcomes. All right. Have a good one. Thank you so much. Love you guys. Bye.